Sandy, thank you so much for taking the time to, be on the show and talk to me again. You've been so helpful. We've been working together as partners for a couple years now within different organizations, of course. But you've just done an incredible job. As I mentioned when we were sort of prepping, I'm a big fan of your work. I'm a big fan of the Pocus brand. Just so many things that that I admire. And I think that we're going to look back at what you've done, you and Alexa and the team have done just in general, but you like on the marketing side as a case study of how to build an early stage brand. So thank you so much.
Wow, what an intro. Thank you so much for having me, George, and for pumping my tires.
All right. Well, we all need that, right? And if I could be that for folks in the world, that would be a win. But it's true, like, and I think it speaks for itself. And, everyone in the space that I've ever spoken to, they're kind of on board with the same perspective. But I wanted to dive in here real quick. If you were to think about the top priorities for that first head of marketing, especially these days, right? Even if you do have funding, right? Like that like those days of growing at all costs, just kind of checking the box on every play that you have seen, or that ChatGPT has given you to run, that's just not the most strategic way, and it just kind of doesn't work anymore. And as early stage startups, we have to really sort of like focus and these sort of things. So if you were a first head of marketing or the first individual focused on that, maybe you're a founder who's tasked with that for the time being, are there any top priorities, like if you had that checklist and maybe if you were to sort of order them, that you would suggest focusing on?
Yeah, I would say the first thing, and this goes for literally any function, actually, it's not just head of marketing, but be really clear on your company level objectives. If you're joining an early stage company, that's typically going to come from the founders. What do the founders want to get out of the next 3 months, 6 months, 1 year? What are their objectives? And then how do you align your priorities and goals to those objectives? So when I started at Pocus, practical example, we were 4 people. We had a few design partners. We had a thesis on this thing called product-led sales. And Alexa's main goal was, we need to build a category. We think that there's enough momentum around this idea of product-led sales. There needs to be a new tech stack to support it. We're building that, but we need to get people to, 1, acknowledge that there is a huge problem, and 2, that there is this new category emerging called product-led sales. So my priorities were all about category creation, education, and getting people kind of on board with this movement. So I had the luxury of having a super clear vision from the founders on that. And if you're coming into an early stage company, I would say before you even think about prioritizing what you would normally do, you need to make sure that there's clarity around that. And I think head of marketing actually has a lot of ability to, if that already doesn't exist, to kind of push at it, because you should be thinking about positioning and messaging and how you fit into the broader landscape. And so if that clarity doesn't exist, I think head of marketing is actually in a great position to try and drive at that clarity by helping the founding team understand, the problems we're solving, how those problems relate to the broader ecosystem of solutions out there, and then where do you specifically fit in today and where do you want to be tomorrow? I think like more tactically, the things that a head of marketing should prioritize are understanding the problem, understanding the personas and ICP, and then really getting extremely clear on near-term positioning. Mm-hmm. And then, that translates into the first few projects that you probably do, which is going to be stand up a website, get those first few kind of blog posts up there, those assets, start to really hone in on your brand tone and voice.
I had a question because you mentioned honing in on those personas and the ICP, and you joined where there were 4 folks, right? So there could be a lot of different sort of scenarios there. You might have a set of founders who have done that early work to figure out, okay, this is our initial thesis around the persona ICP. And even then, I feel like we're constantly, kind of refining, even years into to a venture. Does that mean that you're doing maybe some of that, what maybe folks might call like product marketing type of, wearing those hats or activities while trying to figure out, all right, I'm going to build this category? Because, for the folks out there, if you don't really have a clear vision or charter on, here are the personas, here are the titles, here are the, demographics, psychographics, yada, yada, it's going to be hard to build that category because, who are you building it for, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, 100%. Put on your product marketing hat. And really, the early days are all about doing that foundational product marketing work on deep persona ICP research, and just know that it's going to change. I think when I think about Pocus and how we started, we knew that this problem affected multiple personas within a go-to-market team. So broadly, we knew we were targeting kind of this universe of go-to-marketing folks. Our early hypothesis was that who felt it the most currently were like revenue leaders, so heads of sales, CROs, or the folks that were executing on the ground, like RevOps, as well as the actual reps. And so we kind of thought about those three personas as being our primary. And then, of course, marketing teams feel this pain, CS teams feel this pain. There are other folks on the go-to-market team that feel this pain. And we're building this broad enough category that's going to, target their problems and their needs as well. But when we're thinking about the early days, you have to be able to focus. And so our messaging was primarily to those three personas. And you can kind of neatly fits into economic buyer / decision maker. Then you've got the, person who's setting things up. And then you've got, your end user.
Yeah. I think that's my humble opinion. I think that's maybe one of the reasons why Pocus has been so successful just across the board. I participated in a lot of, community events and stuff like that over the years. And I think it's because, you as a head of marketing are so strategic, but you also like hands down, like hands, in the weeds, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like, doing the actual work. And this is, you're kind of a unicorn because, you hear this all the time where it's like Jason Lemkin posts a lot of this kind of stuff where it's like, oh, you're either going to hire a leader who's like, coming up with strategy and delegating, or someone who's going to be hands-on, but to kind of be both is unique,
I think it's necessary. I don't think you can be successful in an early stage company without having that. And that's not just unique to me on the Pocus team. I would say everybody, especially those that are in leadership roles, have either currently in the weeds or were at one point in the weeds for a significant amount of time. I just don't think that you can really understand what you need out of a hire before you try and do the work yourself as well. So, I've worn many hats. Alexa's worn many hats. Everyone on the team has worn several different hats before we then brought in other folks to kind of, once we've proven something out, now somebody else should go and run with it and make it better. Mm-hmm. But it's hard to know what you need from a hire and someone who's going to execute before you've had the experience of getting down in the dirt and doing it yourself.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that's, I think, one thing that I've seen a lot of early stage startups mess up on, specifically on the sales side, right? But this also happens just, within other functions. But I spent most of my career on the sales side, just been formally in marketing the last couple of years. Thanks to my good buddy Joe Capri over at Reprise, who was like, "You're gonna make the transition from sales to marketing." I was like, "I only did marketing for
to
fun."
The dark side.
Yeah. It was like I had a huge imposter syndrome for a long time, and I still do because, like, I never, I'm 42 years old. I've only been in had a title in marketing last 2 years, right? So, I was always again doing sales, but to kind of, what I was mentioning was like, you saw a lot of these early stage startups hire this VP of sales, who hasn't picked up a phone and done a cold call in 15 years or whatnot, and then you would see them fail because it was too early. They didn't get also, and this is I think one of the big things is like they didn't earn the respect of their direct reports too, because like
Yeah.
they didn't know what that was like, right? It was kind of like sitting back and going, you have no clue what we're dealing with over here. It's like that general who's at the front lines with their frontline troops, who's battling. They can now, if they're good, right, and they should be able to move into this, they can kind of fall back and then let the front line take over. But like being able to navigate between those two positions and wearing those hats, I think is super critical, especially for early stage, right?
Yeah. Back actually on that, one thing I will say is even if you are not great at the thing, you should still try and do it. So where I think everyone gravitates towards obviously hiring where you personally have less knowledge or gaps. And I think you should bring someone in who is smarter than you on those things and knows more than you. But even if you do it poorly, you should still try and do it. But then obviously, in order to do your best work, I think you obviously need to flex on the things that you're already good at. And kind of circling back to what you mentioned about priorities, I just thought of this. It can be really tempting to see all of these different playbooks that other folks are running and think I should do that too. And yes, and I think there's a lot of power in flexing on things that you are uniquely good at, either as a leader or that you are uniquely good at as a company. So, Pocus, we flexed on content creation, community building, because those were the things that I'm good at, that Alexa's good at, that Isaac is good at. And so we found that we had like a unique value proposition there to offer in terms of skill set. And what we didn't go do is all of the demand gen growth marketing stuff that, we're not necessarily uniquely good at. And I think would have been a mistake if we went all in on those tactics just because other companies were doing it, or someone posted something on LinkedIn was like, I got $1 million in pipeline doing this. So I think try and tamp down the temptation to do things that are maybe not in your wheelhouse, especially, I mean, you should experiment, but maybe don't do that out the gate.
No. Well, I want to dig into community building because, you've built really, like, I think one of the models to follow in the space. But just for the folks out there, I just laugh when you talked about kind of how someone posted people post stuff all the time right on LinkedIn that they did XYZ play and generated $1 million in pipeline. How defining pipeline varies, right? Across organization, and B, you like Sandy said, really focus on what you're good at, and at least experiment before you double down on things that maybe you saw on social, especially these days with the algorithm, right? People are doing a lot of different things, but the community piece, I wasn't shocked that you would say that was your strong suit as an organization, because you literally have crushed it and have done such a great job. And I didn't even know that you were only 4 people, early on when you first joined, because that community rocked and it looked so great, and it looked like, boy, this is a large organization. It's interesting what that could do for your brand and the perception. If you were an organization out there thinking about starting a community in your early stage, like, is it ever too early? Like, when do you think that you should start to say, okay, I'm going to double down on this?
Never too early. Community is one of those things similar to outbound or SEO, where I think it takes a long time. And so it's never too early to start investing. But I will say that community is not for everybody. And I think currently it's one of those hot playbooks that everyone talks about on LinkedIn. And so you as an early stage company might be looking at that and thinking, I must do community because everyone on LinkedIn seems to think it's the thing I should do. I think of community like I think of product. You should assess whether there is a need for your community. What problem are you solving with the community? What do you uniquely have to offer that's better than other communities out there? Essentially, go through all the exercises you would for finding product market fit, but do it with community. I think, and I've heard this advice echoed by folks that I admire in the community space, like Nisha Bakshi at Gong, folks over at DBT, I think have a great viewpoint on this. There's a number of people I think who have great communities, and I've all heard them say this, which is have a unique value proposition, treat your community like a product itself.
And for the leaders out there who are maybe considering community, like please don't treat them like a demand gen channel, right? Like I understand that we need to like impact revenue and these sort of things, but it's largely about relationship in my opinion. And you really have to be super strategic about how you're going to convert those. It's not just your regular let's start to spam them or sick BDRs on them. I think that's the easiest way to destroy a community.
Yeah, and it's the weakest reason to start a community. If you are starting a community just to be able to turn it into a channel for your SDRs and BDRs, I think it's the weakest argument for doing it because there's probably better channels for you to be doing that through than standing up a community and putting all this effort into a community. And then you're not really getting the benefit out of that community because you're using it in a transactional way. And I think community is not about transactions. It's about building relationships. And it's also about creating, one-to-one relationships within the community, not just between you and the community, but the community itself should be connecting and sharing learnings and building relationships. And I think you lose that if your sole purpose for starting it is this like very transactional, I want to turn it into a demand gen channel.
Would you agree with a statement that, or with the perspective that if I am an organization out there, I'm a set of founders, or maybe I'm a marketing leader that's sitting in board meetings and I'm about to introduce this, would you agree that if the board is not on board, no pun intended, with what you just said, like being super clear about what this initiative is going to be, and it's not demand gen, it's not some lead form, right? It's not that, it's relationship building, it's long-term strategies. If they're not on board with that day one, then don't do it.
Yeah, probably. I think, if Alexa was the one who masterminded thinking about this community. If she wasn't the one to really push for it and give it the space that it needed to grow and become what it is, I don't know if I would go and make the case for it because that's an uphill battle. And probably not one you want to, it's not a hill you want to die on in your first 90 days as a head of marketing. I think, yeah. And there are ways to make the case. If you feel super strongly, you should push back on that and make the case and get people to believe in it. But is that going to be the best use of your time? That kind of depends on what else you have on your priority list.
Yeah, in my experience, even if you're able to do that, when the shit hits the fan, because it inevitably will at some point, right? There will be difficult times, and then everyone's freaking out, and then it's like, all right, well, we got to get leads, and then they're pushing to then convert these community, members, and you know how that goes. So that's what comes to mind, and just kind of in the experience that I've had. So yeah, I'm thank you for sharing that. If you were to think about the current state of PLG or product-led sales, which y'all have really pioneered, what would you say is the kind of the current state right now, given everything that we've been going through the last 2 years and change? And then lastly, like, how should teams approach potentially leveraging it within their GTM strategy?
Yeah, I think we are seeing a lot of momentum around product-led sales with our customers. There's a lot of adoption. I think what people are realizing is that there is a lot of power in product usage data, and it is really this important form of intent. And then the story with 1+1 = 3 is what's starting to emerge, which is product usage plus marketing intent data plus your customer intent data, bringing all of those things into one and driving playbooks based on that. These really important signals, whether they are product based, marketing based, or customer driven. I think that's kind of like the next frontier we're heading towards, and that a lot of our customers are already starting to execute on and seeing a lot of value. One of the core problems that Pocus solves is obviously bringing all of that data together so that the incremental cost of kicking off a new playbook is actually next to nothing, because you're already bringing all that data into one place and getting it into a state where it's ready to be operationalized and experimented with at a moment's notice. And I think that's really the flywheel we're seeing with our customers. They just have the ability to experiment so much faster with different iterations of playbooks. So, now you can quickly bring your product usage data together with pricing page visits and see if that's a good indicator for outreach by your sales assist team. So being able to do that on the fly, I think is the big unlock that's happening for a lot of teams. And I think we're just going to continue to see that the use cases around that grow. Really cool playbooks that will start to emerge. We're going to see, especially these like larger PLG organizations that we work with, obviously have way more data, and so there's some interesting learnings there that we can get and apply across to other folks that are maybe earlier on in their journey.
Awesome. Sandy, thank you so much for your time. Very much appreciated. It's always great catching up with you, and you've been so super helpful just across the board. So thank you. If folks want to connect with you on social, maybe follow your insights or content, or maybe learn more about Pocus, what are the best channels to reach you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have to plug the community. Join our community. You can apply at pocus.com/community. And I'm always happy to jam on this kind of stuff, especially with other early stage marketers. So shoot me an email, sandy@pocus.com.
Awesome. Well, have a wonderful afternoon and congratulations.
Thanks so much, George. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.